Okay, tonight's on Federalist Paper 1. When the convention met, the delegates met in the Constitutional Convention in Pennsylvania, they were sent there by the different states because the Articles of Confederation just weren't working. We had a lot of problems. States would print their own money, they would lend that money out, they would get goods for that money, and then they would bankrupt that money and make new money. And it was creating quite a few problems. States weren't working with one another, there was problems at borders, and our delegates looked at that and they could see that we were going to devolve into the city-states of Europe, and they knew it was going to happen. So when they all met in Philadelphia, they decided, you know what, let's scrap this whole Federalist Paper thing because we're the laughingstock of the world, and we shouldn't be. A small band of unprofessional soldiers took on the superpower of the day and won, and yet now they're the laughingstock of America, kind of like with having Biden as president. And so they were the laughingstock of the world. And so they said, we got to do something different. So they decided to scrap the whole thing, and they came up with this compound republic with this Constitution. And this is what really created the Anti-Federalists. Think about it today. Let's say we had a convention of states to change some things, let's just bring about term limits. And they all got together and they decided, you know what, we're going to throw the Constitution out and start all over. Would you be a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist at that point? See, I know me, if I was alive in 1787, I'd be an Anti-Federalist because I don't trust many people. I'd be afraid that the states would be losing their power as well. And that's where the Anti-Federalists came from. So when the delegates went back and said, okay, we've decided we're going to scrap the whole thing, we're going to come up with this Constitution, there was a lot of people that were very fearful of the unknown, right? The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And so they were real worried about it. Some of the biggest pushback was coming from New York, because New York was the biggest and it had too many lawyers, and they became the biggest anti-federalists. And so Hamilton, with John Jay, started to write these essays, and they've been deemed the Federalist Papers. There's 85 of them. And Hamilton and John Jay wrote the first 9, and then John Jay got really sick. And so Hamilton asked Madison if Madison would help write these essays to try to convince the people of New York to elect the delegates that they needed to come together to ratify the Constitution. And so this is where these essays come from. Now, one of the beautiful things about having these 85 essays, especially a lot of them written from the person who's known as the father of the Constitution, Madison, is he spells out the reason why they put everything in every article, every section, and every clause. They've got a reason why it's there, and it was argued out with the Anti-Federalists of the things they pointed out that they said, well, this is bad. We're going to lose state sovereignty if we do this. And then Madison would come in and say, okay, these are the things that we considered. This is what we did. It's not a perfect system, but it's a much better system. And remember, it was in order to form a more perfect union, not in order to form a utopia. That's only going to happen after Christ comes back. It's not going to happen while we're alive here. There is no utopia. But they gave us a more perfect union than what we had. And everything is centered on the union. The union of states is our security. It's just like, how do we keep our government in good behavior? The more of us show up, the more afraid they get. January 6th should have proved that to you, right? The more people showed up, the more they had to lie about it and conceal it and call it something different, because they truly were scared when that many people show up. And that many voters show up, it scares people. So Hamilton started with the first Federalist paper. Now, in school, we've all been taught that the legislature does what? They write the law, right? And the executive does what? They enforce the law. And the judicial does what? We've all heard it in school. Interprets the law, right? If you can show me anywhere in any founding document that says that the third branch of government's job is to interpret law, I'll give you $100,000. Doesn't exist. That was a construct of the 20th century. Under Article 6, Section 1, Clause 3, the justices take an oath to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution of the United States, to support the law, not to interpret it. And the reason why is because in the 85 Federalist Papers, it's already all been interpreted. Now, in that packet I handed out, one of the self-evident truths, you know that the word Constitution is an ancient word for the word contract. Contract law goes back into ancient times. And even today, we follow a lot of those doctrines in the law when it comes to a contract. In contract law, we have to go back to what the original intent of that article was in contract law. It doesn't matter how old the contract is. If there's a dispute between the parties to the contract, we go back to the article and we go back to what the original intent, the original meaning of the contract was. And that's contract law. And we still practice that today, except for when it comes to the Constitution. When it comes to the Constitution, there's very few justices that go back to the Federalist Papers to understand precisely what the intent of the article was, and then to uphold that. They believe that they're supposed to interpret that, and that's not contract law. So we practice contract law everywhere except for the Constitution, and this is part of our problem through the 20th century. But we're going to start out with Federalist 1. There's 85 of them. We're only going to hit about 10 of them. Federalist 10 and Federalist 51 are probably the two most cited Federalist Papers ever, and those are the two that are probably studied the most. But I would encourage you, if you have the time, to sit and read all 85. And then when you're done, start with Federalist 1 all over again and read them again. It'll give you a much better understanding of why the Constitution was put together. So I see the Constitution as the what, and I see the Federalist Papers as the why behind it. So let's start with Federalist Paper 1, if that's going to work for me, which it's not now. Surprise, surprise. So, general introduction. Now, I'm not a big fan of Hamilton, but Hamilton hit a home run with this one. Federalist 1, he did a great job of setting everything up and getting it ready for the other 84. And I thought he did an excellent job in 1. Federalist Paper number 1, published on the 27th of October, 1787, Hamilton for the Independent Journal. Now you're going to notice all of them start out to the people of the state of New York, because that was the big state that they were trying to sway. After an unequivocal experience of the inefficacy of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire in many respects, the most interesting in the world. Now, when we read this, think about today and what's going on today. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made. Any wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. Think about that. We were supposed to use deliberation and choice for our political constitution, not accident and force. Since World War I, we've been going to war out of accident and force. We've been doing a lot of things out of accident and force. 2020 was a prime example of accident and force. So we've gotten far away from the very original intent of the Constitution. The other thing is that he says this is the era in which that decision is to be made. This is the era in which the decision is to be made. Do we keep our republic, or do we devolve into a democracy which will quickly become a socialist revolution? This is the era. And if we don't keep our republic, it'll be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. So I think what Hamilton had to say in these first two paragraphs is very important for today. This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. My son-in-law happens to be the captain of one of the largest fire departments in the state of Ohio. And him and I locked horns one day over taxes, because I believe that taxation is theft, especially in today's world. And he made the statement, without taxation, we would never have any fire departments. And that simply isn't true. Benjamin Franklin put together the first fully staffed, fully trained, fully equipped fire department in Boston before there was even any taxes. How did he do it? Right there, he did it through philanthropy and patriotism. See, we pay too little to philanthropy and patriotism. One thing I've learned is if you're having an event and you have a donation at the door, you usually make more than if you've got a cover price at the door. Why is that? Because we're Americans. Because we do give. We are philanthropic when given the chance to be philanthropic. And when you give of your own money rather than a congressman giving of your money, usually your money goes to the right things and it's used properly, isn't it? There's a great speech by Congressman Boone in which there was a house fire in Washington, and there was about 20 wives and some children that were out in the cold. And so they voted to give $20,000 to them to get them out of the cold and to build them a new house. And when Congressman Boone went back to his home district in Kentucky, he found a farmer. And he said, "I'd like to have your vote." And he said, "Mr. Boone, you'll never have my vote ever again." He said, even though it seemed like a good thing to do to help women and children, you didn't do it with your money, you did it with mine. And you didn't ask me, so you'll never get my vote. He said, if you want to give money, if you want to be philanthropic, then be philanthropic, but don't do it with my money. And Congress has forgotten that. They're very philanthropic with Ukraine, with our money. How come they're not giving any of their own, especially when they're getting $176,000 a year and they go in like AOC and 2 terms later, they're millionaires? How do become a millionaire on $176,000 a year. That's some pretty good accounting, I would say. So, as we read this, think about what's happening today, because the human condition hasn't changed, and we have to understand history in the context of today. This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism, to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. And isn't that the truth? The discovery of truth. Mark Twain said, "Never teach a pig to sing. It only irritates the pig and wastes your time." In World War II, there was a gentleman by the name of Bonhoeffer. He has a theory. It's called the Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity. Stupid people are more dangerous than evil people. They are. Evil people, you can discover they're evil and you can point it out, and they can be beat down on it. Stupid people, you can't. Because you can give them all the facts in the world, and they'll go, well, I don't care. I feel that. I think that. I don't really care what you feel or think. What does the data show? What is the evidence? Right? Passions and prejudices, little favorable to the discovery of truth. Man, I'll tell you, he nailed that. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of the power, emolument, and consequence of the offices that they hold under the state establishments. Is that the same for today? Most certainly is. I'm going through that in Hillsdale right now. People so scared to give up a little bit of their status as a county official. They'll move heaven and earth. They'll lie. They'll cheat. They'll steal. They'll do whatever they need to do. They'll use their positions of power to enslave and take the freedom away from people just to protect that little bit of power. If that'll happen on a county stage, what do you think would happen on a state stage? So these are the people. What does it say in the Bible about the rich man in heaven? Right? This is the same concept. And the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. Now remember, the union is what's going to keep us safe. Even Lincoln talked about preserving the union. So they said there's another class of men. Does anybody remember Benjamin Franklin's speech? There's only two things that rule the hearts of man: avarice and ambition, the love of money and the love of power. Hamilton hit this one out of the park too. It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views, Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men may be actuated by upright intentions. Remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When we get into the Federalist Paper 10, Madison warns us about that. He warns us that we have to keep the best intentions of government under control. And even the people are subject to faction with the best of intentions. And that's why they made the 5th article of the Constitution so arduous, was to protect the people from their own best intentions. And it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. So numerous indeed so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment, that we upon many occasions see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions. Now, I want to bring something out very important here. At Saturday's state convention for the MIGOP, there was a young lady of Muslim descent that was running for the outreach chair. Now, the Patriots have a lot of very strong Christian people. In fact, a lot of them are so biased and so much Puritans that they miss the truth because of their own bias. We had a lot of people go, well, we can't vote for her. She's Muslim. Yeah, in Article 1 it says there shall be no religious test. Right? Now, when I was in the military, my theater of operation was the Middle East. Our cultural class, we had to read the Quran in its original language. So I'm probably one of the few, when I talk to people, that actually have read the Quran from cover to cover. I had someone today tell me, well, I was really disappointed in that. This is a Christian nation. I said, no, it's not. And the Republican Party is not a Christian party. It's based on principles that are true principles because they're found in the Bible. And a lot of those principles were taught by Jesus Christ. How many people here in this room know about the Quran, have read the Quran? What have you been told about the Quran? Do you know that in the Quran it talks about the virgin birth of Jesus Christ? How many people knew that? Okay, 1, 2, 3. It also calls Jesus Christ the Messiah. How many people knew that? Okay. How many people knew that the Muslims are actually looking for the second coming of Christ? That's in there. In fact, a lot of Christ's sermons are in the Quran. How many people knew that? Now, I had somebody go, well, but they serve Allah. That's still the God of Abraham. Remember, Isaac and Ishmael were half-brothers, right? Even God told Ishmael's mother to flee, didn't he? Okay? So in the Christian religion, in the Jewish religion, they call God Yahweh. In the Christian religion, they call him what? Yoseva, right? And in the Muslim religion, they call him Allah. All three refer to the God of Abraham. Now, the Muslims in Detroit, especially in Dearborn, believe that they're Democrats. But the Democrat Party, the Liberal Party, the Progressives, are completely contrary to their principles and their views. But they've never been told that. Right? Well, right now, the law firm I work for is supporting the parents of the Dearborn High School that are completely enraged with this CRT and this transgenderism being taught to their children in the school. They are completely opposed to it. Completely. They have a lot of the same principles that the Christians have. Isn't that something? They have family values. They don't want their children taught this transgenderism. They don't believe in this CRT. They don't believe in any of that progressive stuff that's being forced upon their families right now. So what better time than to convince them and show them that the conservative party is the best party for them, right? So we had some people that were very completely short-sighted because they thought that there should be a religious test, and because she wasn't Christian. One of the best things I ever learned about Christianity, I learned from Seinfeld. I'm going to give you the same speech I used to give in my classroom that I used to get in trouble for. One thing, I grew up Baptist. We judge everybody, right? But in this Seinfeld episode, Elaine Boozler, who's horrible with small talk, was with Cosmos Kramer, and they were in the soup Nazi line. And she happened to swear, and she said, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." Kramer said, "Why is that?" She said, "Well, you see that guy over there? Kind of wanted to get with him, and he's really churchy." Okay, well, at the end of the episode, they're all the way up front, and they've been banished, they're off to the side, and he makes it up to the front of the line, and she starts to make small talk with him. And she said, I apologize for earlier." He said, "For what?" She said, "I swore I know how religious you are." He said, "What do I care? I'm not the one going to hell." Right? So one of the things we have to realize as Christians are principles do not equal my salvation. Right? If I know my salvation, it's not incumbent upon me for your salvation. You'll never answer for my sins, and I'll never answer for yours. One of the first gifts God gave man was the gift of free will. So if those Muslims believe in the same principles and the same family values I do, then I'm going to band with them for those values. Now, if they decide that I'm wrong and they're right, I guess we'll all have to see. But the fact of the matter is, I know where my salvation is, and I only answer for me. That's so completely against how Baptists are raised, isn't it? Okay, so I just wanted to bring that out because that's why there is no religious test. And some of the stuff that he's talking about, these jealousies and fears, when we are operating on our beliefs or how we feel, instead of on facts, then we're doing a very big disservice to the Constitution. If you remember the speech by Patrick Henry, he said, "I want to know the whole truth, no matter how horrible it is. I want to know the whole truth so that I can prepare for what needs to happen." Knowing the whole truth means understanding data, truth, not feelings, not thoughts, not beliefs, but true data. One of the things that Franklin gets bashed for being a deist for is because of this statement. He said, "I don't know that I believe in the divinity of Christ, but I see no disadvantage in it." He was talking very logically, and that logic is, I can't prove the divinity of Christ. I didn't see it. I wasn't born at that time. I don't have any evidence to prove it. But if I don't believe in the divinity of Christ and I die and he truly was divine, I got big problems. But if I believe in the divinity of Christ and I die and he wasn't, nothing lost. Right? That's a pretty logical thought process on it. But of course we know that faith goes much deeper than just believing something, right? But I thought that was very interesting. He gets called a deist for that statement alone, because there's too many pious Christians that go, oh, he said he didn't believe in the deity of Christ. That's not what he said. He said, I have no proof of it, but I see no disadvantage in not believing it. Did I finish this one?
Yep.
So numerous indeed the powerful, okay. Sorry, I get off track. I can't remember where I was. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation of those who are ever so much persuaded of their